This is the first One Lap Hero video of the year, and it is something completely different. I mean, it's not very different, it's an MX-5, but it is the only one of its kind that I've seen. Tom, the very happy owner there, an engineer behind the thing, will explain. I think there are a handful. He mentioned 4 of them exist in the world, and all the interesting stuff happens under the bonnet. I know that from here it looks like we are again doing an MX-5 spotlight in One Lap Heroes, but I guarantee you this has been very, very interesting. I was at the SPS open house together with the guys from the UK and the guys from the US, and there is one specific car that actually got my interest. And this doesn't happen often because in the world of supercharged and turbocharged MX-5s, I think I've seen everything. We all have seen everything. The car has been like basically forced, it has been forced induction for like years. So when you think that you have seen everything, then you see this. Tom,
thank you.
Actually, very nice to have you on the channel.
Great to be here.
I want you to tell us a little bit what is this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a big journey. So my MX-5 journey started in about 2014. I think it's fairly typical. A friend at work had an MB. He took me for a ride just out from work, and I fell in love with him. I couldn't believe that there was something that so attainable, that was so fantastic, just absolutely. So I think it was about 2 weeks later I had bits of this car. I bought a Mark 1 that was not so rust-free, unfortunately, which I think is a common theme. And I'd never worked on a car before then, so it was my first car that I ever started working on, and really just like built it up through the years. So unfortunately that first shell, as I started doing more and more work, rebuilding suspension, doing all that kind of stuff that we all do, I was just noticing there was some nastiness in it and it was getting a bit too much. So I found this shell, this G-Red shell, so it's an early 1990 car on the south coast. It had been off the road for about 6 years, but no like structural corrosion or anything. There was a bird's nest in the engine bay, but apart from that we cleared them out. They weren't that happy about it, but you know, we live on.
But you had to empty that engine bay because good things happen there.
Yeah, they're not in there anymore. There's not the space for them. But yeah, I did that shell swap in a week. So I took my old car off the road, took the whole thing apart, new shell, everything back in it. Yeah, in a week, and then MOT at the end of it, because it was my only car at the time. So I had to do the whole swap in a week. MOT, straight into work with the new car, with this car. And then I started getting into track days, and then again, kind of fairly typical, you know, you start looking at the brakes. I'm really into my like spreadsheets for everything, you know, like calculating your weight distributions, your transfer of weights, all that kind of stuff, working particularly with the brakes to get that really dialed in. Adding things like adjustable bias inside the cockpit so that you can adjust it for like wet and dry driving on the fly, all that kind of stuff. It was M45 supercharged at the time. I did that fairly early on actually. That was on the first car. So it was making about 200 horsepower. It was 180 at the wheels or something. Absolutely fantastic fun. Really loved it. Had that on there for a number of years. And then in 2020, I think another kind of common trend is a bit of a COVID project. So the supercharger that is now on there and the original charge cooler, which is a water to air charge cooler, I found on eBay for like a really good price. It was actually a kit for a Peugeot 306.
Okay.
It came with a manifold, throttle body and everything. So I knew that it could work on a 4-cylinder. You know, roughly the lengths are going to be roughly the same, but obviously the things like the manifolds and the inlets weren't going to work. So it was a great fabrication project. It was my first aluminium TIG welding project. So it was a real challenge, and since then it's just really evolved.
You mentioned that this car started with a bird's nest in there, and you mentioned about finding like a supercharger on eBay, but it's not what people will expect to see when you open the bonnet. So should we open the bonnet and we discuss a bit more about what you did?
Absolutely.
Actually looking at the car. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to take the other side?
Yeah. This looks very different than any Miata I've seen.
Yeah.
Starting with the actual supercharger. This is a twin screw supercharger.
Correct. Yeah.
Give me a bit more details.
Yeah, sure. So it's an auto rotor. So it's an old Swedish brand of twin screw. There's a bit of crossover with the engineers that worked in auto rotor, as best I understand. That it's most kind of commonly related to like a Kenny Bell. It's along those lines. But yeah, twin screw. It's 0.87 litres per revolution, so not big. So in terms of displacement size, between the more kind of commonly known superchargers, it's nearer an M62, but it's a little bit smaller than an M62. There was a lot of fun in working out how to make it work. There'd been a few people doing kits for other models, like back in the early 2000s. So there were some kits for old Volvos using these superchargers, kits for old MGs using these superchargers, and particularly with the oiling of the supercharger, they were going different routes. And some of them were more successful than others, as best I understand from my research. I was wondering which way to go with the oiling system. So there's two options really. You can either feed it the engine oil, which you need to know what restrictor size to use, because otherwise you can flood it and then bad things happen. And I mean, I did eventually find a replacement one, and that's actually on a kit car that I made. But at the time, it's a very rare supercharger, so you want to get it right first time. The other option was using it as the Eatons do, where you have basically it's a closed system for the oiling, so it's just like an oil bath, and that's how it lubricates. I was very fortunate to find a guy called Dennis Priddle, who's an old school engineer who used to do drag racing back in the 70s. He was the first person in the UK to do a 6-second pass. So really knowledgeable guy, but he'd done some work with auto rotors. He was actually trying to put them into OEMs. It's not an OEM supercharger. He was trying to get them into OEMs. But he'd obviously, he'd done all the maths and everything behind them. And luckily I managed to seek him out, and he was an absolute, godsend with the help for getting this to run reliably. So he advised me on like the restrictor sizes, that I need to run, advised me about boring out like the drains, all that sort of thing, and it's been problem-free, because of that with a supercharger. So in my case, it's fed with engine oil, much like a turbo with a restrictor, much like a
like a traditional turbocharger,
exactly like a ball bearing turbo. It's a 0.6mm restrictor that I made, and yeah, it's been problem free. So really happy with that.
For me, what actually got my attention originally, it might sound funny, but it is actually your charge cooling, your water cooling setup is what got my attention. Then I noticed the supercharger, that was a little bit different than everything else I've seen. And then I noticed like all the small details, because it is quite interesting that you have like a very clean engine bay. Although there is like, by the way, supercharging means that there's gonna be like a lot of things happening in there. So still, as far as like belt orientation goes, positioning of everything, and how clean the whole thing is, even like down to picking the right intake tract and having like everything like clean and closed and not getting like hot air in. So do you want to talk to me a little bit about the cold side of stuff, which is actually a little bit like also the name of the
the name of the company? Little hobby company. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start from the beginning on the system.
Boys, if you are following through and you have seen the details, we're talking about the big square box here. Like we're gonna discuss more about.
Okay. I'll start with the
any way you want.
Let's perfect. As I said, when I originally got this supercharger, it came with a water-to-air charge cooler. It uses Laminova cores, and what they are is they're basically an aluminium extrusion with channels through them, with fins. I think they're brazed to them, but external fins, lots and lots of fins. And what happens is you pass the coolant through the channels in the middle, and you put the air through the fins. And because you have so many fins, you get huge heat transfer area for the area that.
An interesting form of heat sink, let's say.
Yes.
But you might have not seen it like this. Funnily, the car has another one of these coolers here for the oil.
Yes.
Correct. So people might have been more familiar with this, because I think these are more widely used, because they fit like packaging-wise in places.
Absolutely.
Maybe you have not seen them like that, but that is same principle, same type of cooler in a different type of bath, but like same idea.
Exactly.
And is this all manufactured by you? Like, did you CNC the stuff? I mean, like, did you design and create all this stuff? Because it's like aluminium welding and whatnot. So what I see here is all your work?
Everything is mine. Yeah. So the way I make the charge coolers is. In my workshop, I don't have CNC. I have a manual lathe and a manual mill and a powerful TIG welder. So the charge coolers are made up in many different parts. So you machine the top plate, the bottom plate, the sides, cut to length and milled, and then you've got the end caps as well, which I machine myself. So the way it all goes together is, if you ignore the end caps to start with, and the tubes in the middle. If you ignore the end caps to start with, you put the top plate and the bottom plate and the tubes in the middle that hold the laminova cores together. After they've been machined, they're all very exact, and then you have to weld them together, and everything moves. And then you have to go through a post-machining process. So I had to work out how to line bore on my lathe to ensure that you get the tubes absolutely straight to the correct size. When you're fabricating the whole charge cooler, you have to be very, very careful with how much you're distorting, because you have limited wall thicknesses. And when you then go to do the post-machining, if you've let it warp too much, then you end up with far too thin wall thicknesses, all this kind of stuff. And it's also a structural member, it holds the supercharger.
It is also the mount, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very interesting packaging. But I think at the same time, I think it actually kind of works on the engine bay, and I do like the approach. Also, since we're talking about like cooling, I see also like a bit the stack of radiators is also quite interesting.
Yes.
So you have tilted, and the charge cooler has its own.
Correct. Yeah. So there's two radiators. They're actually exactly the same radiator. They just turn 180 degrees from each other. I think they're from a Fiat Punto actually, in aftermarket.
Okay.
I think from memory. I might have remembered that wrong, but. The original rad setup was more traditional, so it came up here. And I noticed that even with aluminium ducting that I'd made, because of the length of the nose, the angle was so steep that you were only really getting only the bottom half of the radiators were getting dirty, suggesting to me that maybe the top of the radiator wasn't really working as effectively as it could. So I just had an idea.
Engineers. Yeah, continue.
Yeah,
continue.
Well, I wanted. Historically, the car, I've struggled to get the oil cooling right. I've had setups that do the oil cooling well, but they're on the bottom of the car, and so on the country roads you end up damaging them all the time. I used to have a scoop on the bottom of the car, and it would be the first thing to get ripped off if you have a little.
By the way, modern BMWs do it like this. They have traditional M2s, F series, and this series, they have the oil cooler at the bottom of the thing, with the risk that this comes with.
Yeah, I mean the cooling was great, but it was just one of those things that got really annoying. You see something in the middle of the road coming up, you can't avoid it. There's somebody on the other side, and there goes your scoop.
I get it. So the car setup is a little bit different, correct?
Yes.
So you run one of these cores.
Yeah. So this is the new oil cooler. I did have a smaller version of this, but it wasn't quite doing the cooling that I wanted. And so this was really the reason for the redesign of the radiator setup, because it's quite a long unit. To package it, I really needed the width of the car to package it. And then in order to give the clearance to the engine, I needed to move the rads forward. I didn't want to just move them forward. I wanted, if I tilted them down, it also gets rid of the problem of having such a steep angle. So it was I feel like a neat solution to kind of two little problems. One of them's an actual problem, and one was probably a problem just in my head. It's
kind of also sealing them also with the front of the car, so you make sure that the air kind of goes through them.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, actually very, very cool. And I think also I really like how all lines are handled and how your overflow bottles are there and everything is kind of neat and tidy. So basically, I think we tackled the supercharging side of things.
Sure.
Is the engine stock? Because I don't think you can do the power levels that you are doing with stock engine. So do we give them some power levels as well?
Yeah, so at the moment this is making 350 horsepower, that's at the crank, so it's 310 wheel, and it's 265 pound-feet of torque. So yeah, it's a good level of power, lots of fun.
So what is the engine then, the engine spec?
Yeah, so it's still a BP, fairly normal on the bottom end, so forged pistons, it's 1 mil overbore, so 84mm pistons, forged rods and Manleys, ATI damper. I like the ATI damper on supercharged cars because of the way they integrate to the front of the crank.
By the way, belt orientation is very important in a supercharger. If you had friends that track MX-5s with superchargers, getting your belts right and the whole array, and to have a long enough belt and with enough stretch but not too much and no vibration, that will actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I did the. There were some resources online to help with belt tension calculations and all this sort of stuff. So I measured the torque of the tensioner, and then you can calculate it out with the angles to make sure your kind of belt tension is in the right area. So that's it's all calculated. But yeah, I mean with the engine, so the bottom end is a pretty typical forged bottom end build, but the cylinder head is really where the kind of more than you would expect peak power comes from. So
That bit was very interesting for me. This is actually, guys, we had already a chat before, so he actually explained to me how much power he found by reworking the head, and I found this bit like very interesting. I know that we're nerding out a little bit too much on details, but I really did find it very interesting, and I think like there is people out there with high power Miatas that they might find this information cool. And I think that also like in traditional supercharging, this might not be, people tend to not go too deep. They actually get superchargers just because the kit is easy and you drop it in and you don't do. But you found a lot of time and a lot of lap time, but I mean like a lot of power and for sure lap time as well in the head. So
yeah, that's right. So I found a program called Lotus Engine Simulator, and it's a really detailed engine simulator package. I couldn't really believe that you could just download it for free off the internet. It seemed kind of crazy, but because it's so detailed, you need a lot of baseline data to feed into it. Some was judgment, like I work in the auto industry anyway, and then because it's an MX-5, you know, there's so much resource out there. So really geeky stuff, you know, like flow coefficients across the valves. People had done that before and measured it. People had already done the work with things like your normal kind of porting job and what that effect is on the flow coefficients through the valves, and using that data and then a little, you know, bit of judgment, measuring cam profiles that I had, so stock cams, stock Mark II cams, and also a set of aftermarket cams that I already had. Kind of plug them all in, and you can play with like different parameters. You can play with different port widths. You can play with different port lengths, which I'm limited with what I can do there because of the packaging. But you can play with different cam profiles, all this kind of stuff. Make up a cam profile that's based off an existing one and see what effect a bit more lift or a bit more duration has or a bit more overlap has. And from all that, I kind of put together my like optimum package that I could achieve on the car virtually. And then I aimed to replicate that, you know, in real life. Very conveniently, I'd already had a set of upgraded cams on the car, and they turned out to be pretty much perfect. So I was like, okay, all right, let's do that then. And then, yeah, built up the head, put it on the dyno, and then, you know, I know people who go to the dyno, I think my experience with the dyno is you either walk away sad or happy, you know, like there's one of two outcomes on it, and this was definitely a very happy day. I mean, I'd run some data logs and stuff, so I knew it was definitely moving in the right direction, and I could feel the difference with the cylinder head, particularly up the top end. But to make the extra 50 horsepower was pretty incredible. My simulation said I would only make 30 horsepower, which was great, you know, that's awesome. But to make the extra 50 was pretty insane. And on that day, we also back-to-back tested with a stock intake cam, and we dropped, I think it was 25 horsepower just by putting that stock in. So, you know, the calculations
you knew that
right.
You were kind of on the right track.
Yeah,
so basically, to make a long story short, we're talking about a forged BP with a worked head and a cold side supercharger that is basically a little bit smaller than an MP62. It's basically an engine that does like 300 to 350 horsepower to simplify things. And what I love is actually the rest of the car looks kind of stockish. Yeah. So do you tell me about like general setup? I see like very common solutions when it comes to suspension stuff that we probably know. So what are you running? Suspension, brakes? You mentioned brakes as well, so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, suspension. I mean, they're great handling cars anyway. So there's, you know,
absolutely. You don't need to, what this is what we love about Miatas. You don't need to do a lot. Like absolutely, this is for sure part of it.
The tweaks I've made. So I mean, first of all, the coilovers are the Maestro Club Racers, which I've been happy with. Suspension-wise, there's some like offset bushings, Del Rim bushings in the bottom arms. Well, the Del Rim bushings like pretty much everywhere except for where I need like a little bit of give because of the suspension geometry. They're slightly wider on the front just because I've offset them to just poke the wheels out a little bit more. On the rear, it's kind of much the same, really. So again, Del Rim bushes where I can, and like bronze PU bushings in the places that I can't. The differential is a 3.6 rear end, but it's got an aftermarket. It's a 3J driveline differential, so it's a bit noisy.
Okay.
But I love it on track. It's absolutely fantastic.
A good diff in these cars when you have power. It's cool. Yeah, I don't know if it's faster, but it's definitely cool.
It feels good. I mean, I noticed that I could get on the power earlier out of like mid and slow speed corners. And then I also like the traits when you lift off, it gives you a real nose in. So
wheel and tire package. The car doesn't have a lot of tires, so you're going to go fires?
It's pretty typical. I mean, it's still a road car. This is the thing. So it's not like a track build particularly. It's built so you can go like quick on the road and then go to a track day and be, you know, quick and fast, but not like overly compromised for either. So
you have like stock discs with wheel woods?
So they're ND discs.
Okay.
With the, I can't remember exactly which wheel woods they are, but
Dynalite.
wheel wood 4 pots.
Yeah.
As I said, I did
And
a lot
the
of work.
master, yeah, you mentioned like it is a little bit different. So what's happening here?
Yeah, so it's the Willwood 1-inch master, and that's because I run the sport rear brakes with the larger piston in them.
Absolutely.
So just to retain the pedal feel. It's a bit of a harder push, but I don't mind.
No, absolutely.
And then there's a Willwood biasing valve there, which is on like a rotating throttle cable into the cabin. So as I said,
perfect. So you can adjust
it on the fly. Yeah.
No, very, very cool. And it's 15 by 8.
Yeah, 15 by 8.
205 Yokohamas.
Yes. Yeah. I did run more extreme track tyres, and I've kind of come back a little bit because on the road I just like the extra little bit of compliance in the sidewall. It just makes it a nicer drive on country roads, which is, to be perfectly honest, where it spends most of its time. But then I don't feel kind of overly compromised on the track. You know, they'll keep up on a dry track day. They're not the quickest by any means.
No, absolutely.
You can have fun. You can slide the car around.
I'll be honest with you. This engine will feel at home like in a track beast as well. You know, like in something stripped with big aero and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what got my attention is actually that the engine package is quite elaborate.
Yes.
But the outside of the car is quite tame.
Yeah.
So basically, no crazy wheels. It still looks like an MX-5.
Yeah.
And I think it has like honestly 3 times the power of an MX-5, because I will tell you, in reality, these cars are now they're 30 years old. They barely do 100 horsepower. So I think this has like 3 times the power in a package that looks very similar. With the subtle handling tics, I think it's going to be like an epic thing. Thank you very much. You probably want to see a lap. I will explain one more time that this is Tom's like first time here, so don't expect like an epic hot lap. I actually specifically told him to take it a little bit easy because this is too much power for the package, in my humble opinion. But we are still gonna hear the thing scream or whine. I think like it's more whine. Man, I honestly like very, very interesting. Tell me this, one final question. You told me that these are actually quite rare. So how many of these cars exist?
Yeah, so I mean, I've built 3 of these. So there's a Mark II with a TVS 900 kit that I did, which the owner really enjoys, loving it. And I did a kit car with the same supercharger as this. So I found one in the States. And actually, Steph, that you were speaking to, helped me import it to the UK. And then it's actually using my old charge cooler on that kit car. And testing that in the winter, no windscreen, was pretty crazy. Yeah, it was awesome.
So one of 2 with that engine setup, and only a handful of cars
3
like
in the UK, and one that I haven't done. I think there's one in the US that uses a cold side supercharger and a water-to-air charge cooler. But I haven't kind of like seen much or anything of that car. I've seen some pictures and some forum posts. So 4 in the world, but I stand to be corrected. You know, things come out of the woodwork.
So in the world of Miatas, this is a very rare thing, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let's jump on board.
right really. Power. Over to the right. Off. Left. Miss, hit, miss, this is called. So over to the left. Off. Brake. 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 Now hit this apex. Now wash out to the left. Power, power, power. Miss, hit, miss. Brake in a straight line, off the brakes, turn right, on the brakes again. Slow left under. Left to left. Go down and down to the right, heavy braking. That's good. Push out to the wall, one continuous curve. Just after the dip it brakes, then yeah, perfect. Over to the right. It's probably a flat out left-hander, but you judge it.
I'll give it a go.
Over to the right and then back to the left. And then brake. Your brakes are better than mine. And then power, power, power. Push it down to the left. One continuous curve of 3 left-handers. You might want to lift for the 4th. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. Wash it out. Back in. This one, then over to the right. Flip the apex. Power. Keep going. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Right. Over to the right, braking where he is. The double left-hander, that's good. Wash it out, back in, and over. Stay over to the left, just after press double brakes and then right-hander. Brake, power. Over to the left, and over to the right. Hit like this, yeah. Follow them into the carousel. Lovely jubbly. Power, power, power. Go on, run it. Touch your brakes, push it out to the right. Stay on the right. Brake downshift from left-hander. And you know this bit anyway, don't you? Keep going with the guidance. So yeah, go to the right, over to the left. Power. Braking. Go around the outside of them if you can. It's a little crest here, stick to the left. Take an early gear before the braking point, if you can find one. Right. Left, double left. Clip the curve on the right on the way out if you want. Over to the left, power, power, power. Brake after the dip. Over to the right. Throttle, throttle, throttle. Over to the left. Over to the right, braking. Double left for bruncheon. As brave as you dare. Power, power, power. Braking. Throw it in. Get on the power. Over to the left. More, 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 more. Presents wherever they are. And you can always take this curve on the right as to straight line your exit. I try to stay out to the right here, it's good speed. I try to stay out to the right, take an early gear, so I can get a nice line through here.
Yeah.
And then just flat down to the jump. And then basically you're braking for the jump, off the brakes, as soon as you land, brake again, double right-hander, wash it out to the gravel basically. You can see the white patch as it goes through. It's a left-hander, go out wide. And then again, I try and take an early gear, because you can get so offline here, you want to turn early, get down onto that line, so you can flat out down here basically.
Yeah.
And then you're almost flat out all the way through. But you have to get that bit right. If you're offline there, you're in that wall. But yeah, here you kind of clip this curve, you clip that curve, and then it's out over to the left again. out here.